I'll be honest. The night my boss stood up at our company dinner and told a room full of people that he'd been replacing me for 2 years, something in me cracked so quietly I barely heard it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was the sound of a man realizing he'd been invisible for far longer than he knew. I didn't plan on telling anyone this story, but the truth is, I haven't slept properly since that night, and maybe saying it out loud will make it feel real. For almost 10 years, I was the guy everyone went to when things broke. The unglamorous problems, the late-night crises, the can you just take a quick look? Tasks that were never quick. I wasn't loud. I wasn't flashy. I didn't flirt with management or talk myself up in meetings. I was just consistent. The kind of employee who shows up 10 minutes early and stays 30 minutes late because it feels wrong to leave things unfinished. People joked about it sometimes. Ask him, he'll do it. He's basically the department's safety net. I laughed with them, not realizing I'd become a cushion they'd stopped noticing was even there. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. End of quarter, record numbers, new clients, a cheerful excuse for overpriced wine and a rented hall, with white tablecloths that looked like they belonged at a wedding. I showed up in the same suit I wore to every formal event, the one I kept pressed in the back of my closet because I only needed it twice a year. Nothing felt wrong at first. People were talking, eating, complaining about workloads like they always did. But my boss, Mark, kept glancing at me with a kind of tight, gleaming smile I'd never seen before. Like he knew a joke I didn't. Every time I met his eyes, he looked away too quickly, like he was holding something behind his tongue. Halfway through the night, he tapped his fork against his glass. The room quieted. Someone dimmed the lights a little. People turned toward him with expectant smiles, waiting for another rehearsed speech about teamwork and growth. Mark stood with his hand on his wine glass, shoulders back, chest proud in the way men stand when they think they're about to be impressive. And for a second I let myself hope he'd mentioned the project I closed alone last month, when 3 people called in sick, or maybe just say my name. Not praise, just recognition. I wasn't greedy. Instead, he cleared his throat, grinned, and said, "Well, tonight's a special night, and I've got a fun announcement." People leaned in. Someone whistled jokingly. He pointed at me across the room. "I've been replacing this guy for 2 years," he said, laughing, "and now it's official. You're done here." For a moment, nobody reacted. It was the kind of silence where the air itself gets confused. Then came the scattered chuckles, the kind people make when they're not sure if something is a joke. Mark didn't clarify. He didn't smile at me like a prankster waiting for me to laugh back. He just looked pleased with himself, like he'd finally scratched an itch. My ears rang, not from anger, from humiliation, the kind that blooms hot under your skin, then turns cold as it spreads. I felt every pair of eyes flick toward me, then flick away fast, pretending they weren't staring. I remember my hands, how steady they looked on the edge of the table, like they belonged to someone else. I remember the taste in my mouth, metallic, numb. I remember one of my coworkers' wives whispering, "Is he serious?" under her breath. Then Mark added, almost casually, "HR will send you the paperwork Monday, but hey, enjoy the night." Enjoy the night? I stood up. Not abruptly, not dramatically. I just rose from my chair, pushed it in out of habit, and walked toward the exit. I didn't trust myself to say anything. My voice felt sealed behind a wall of disbelief. I passed people who avoided meeting my eyes. I passed the bar where the bartender wiped the counter too slowly. I passed the entrance where the conference hall attendant looked up, confused, as if he expected me to come back with a forgotten coat or spilled drink. Outside, the air was colder than it should have been, the kind that stings your lungs a little. I walked to my car without thinking, like my body was following muscle memory, and my mind was still back in that room, seated in that cheap banquet chair, trying to replay the moment frame by frame. I sat behind the wheel, keys in my hand, not starting the engine, just breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't punch the steering wheel like people do in movies. I just felt hollow, like something had been scooped out of me. I drove home without turning on the radio, without thinking about anything except the weight of my own heartbeat. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, letting the quiet close around me. I thought the story ended there, with humiliation, shock, disbelief. But it didn't, because less than an hour later, my phone buzzed. A message from a coworker. No text, no explanation, just an audio file. And the moment I pressed play, I realized the dinner wasn't the betrayal. It was only the announcement. But that was just the beginning. When I pressed play, I expected a drunk voicemail, maybe someone checking if I was okay. What I heard instead was Mark's voice, loud, slurred, with cheap whiskey, dripping with the smugness he'd worn all night. "Yeah, I finally did it," he said, laughing. "Took me 2 damn years to clean up his mess. The kid worked hard, sure, but he didn't know how to think. I need someone who can make me look good, not someone who just does the work." Someone else in the background snorted. "You're gonna tank the place without him." Mark barked a laugh. "Nah, he'll be a good scapegoat if numbers drop. HR will spin something, they always do." I replayed that part twice. Scapegoat, numbers drop, replace him, make me look good. The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls leaned in. My anger didn't explode. It settled, heavy, precise. I'd spent years thinking loyalty was noticed, respected. I didn't realize it could also be weaponized. I texted my coworker back, "How much do you have?" His reply came in seconds. "Enough. More if you want it." He's been bragging for months. I didn't answer. I just sat there, the audio still open on my screen, listening to my boss laugh about firing me like it was a party trick. That was when the embarrassment drained out of me, replaced by something colder, something still. I opened my laptop, not to rant online, not to write a resignation letter. I didn't even have a job anymore. I opened it because, after 10 years, I knew exactly where our company hid its dirt. Every shared drive, every forgotten folder, every document people assumed no one would ever read again. I started slow. Emails first, the ones from the nights I'd stayed late to fix Mark's mistakes, while he was already home posting pictures from expensive dinners. The urgent tasks he'd passed off as his own work. The reports he'd signed without reading, reports I'd written line by line, then invoices, project files, timelines he'd manipulated, approvals he wasn't supposed to give, a handful of expenses that looked suspiciously personal. Each one a small puzzle piece, alone meaningless, together a picture that wasn't pretty. By 2 a.m., I had a folder so full it made my laptop fan kick on. I stared at it, exhausted but wired, the adrenaline refusing to settle. For the first time since dinner, I felt something close to clarity. My phone buzzed again, another message from that same coworker. "You didn't hear this from me, but he didn't replace you. He replaced the title. The company is still using your work. They need it to stay afloat." I leaned back, letting that sink in. So Mark really had been lying to everyone for 2 years, pushing my work through under someone else's name, pretending I wasn't essential while depending on me more than any of them knew. Irony's funny like that. There was more. Another audio file. This time his voice wasn't laughing. "I'll push him out before he figures out what's going on," he muttered. "He's too naive to fight back anyway. He'll just disappear." Naive? Disappear? I closed my eyes for a second, not because it hurt. It didn't. Not anymore. It clarified things. Every late night, every saved project, every moment I'd stepped in because I thought I was doing the right thing. He really believed I'd just fade out of the world quietly, and maybe I would have. But then, while organizing documents, I clicked something I'd forgotten existed, an archived approval request, more than a year old, a financial one. Mark's signature was on it, but the work attached to it, mine, the timestamp, while I was on sick leave. A year ago, I'd been in bed with the flu so bad I couldn't stand. And yet, according to that document, I had magically completed a crucial project milestone. Except I hadn't. He had submitted my old draft, recycled it, claimed he oversaw it, claimed my approval. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. A cold, steady breath left my lungs. This was bigger than office politics, bigger than bruised pride. This could bury him, or the company, or both. My phone lit up again. A final text from my coworker. "You didn't deserve tonight. Do something with this, please." I looked at the screen, at the folder I'd created, at the evidence building like a quiet storm. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt my heartbeat settle into something that wasn't fear. Not hope, not revenge. Focus. The kind that comes right before the ground shifts. I shut the laptop and whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that doesn't feel emotional. It feels mechanical, like a switch had flipped, and all that was left to do was follow the current. I made coffee. I shaved. I put on the same shirt I wore the day before the dinner, not out of sentiment, but because it reminded me who I was before Mark tried to make me disappear. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in the office of the State Labor Commission with a flash drive in my pocket and a folder under my arm. The woman at the reception desk didn't even look up when she asked why I was there. "Employer misconduct," I said calmly. That made her look up. Within 15 minutes, I was speaking to an investigator. A quiet man with silver hair and tired eyes. The kind of person who seemed to have spent decades watching people fold under pressure or break under injustice. I placed the flash drive on his desk like a confession. "This," I said, "is everything." He plugged it in, clicked through a few files. His eyebrows lifted once, the slightest reaction when he saw the falsified approval from my sick leave week. He leaned back. "We'll need copies and a formal statement." "I'm not going anywhere," I told him. He studied me. "You look steady." "I am." "Good," he said. "This is going to make a lot of noise." Noise wasn't even the half of it. 2 days later, the investigations began. Quiet at first. Emails from compliance, polite requests for files, calendar invitations that made managers whisper. Then louder, unannounced walkthroughs, interviews behind closed doors, HR calling people in one by one. The company wasn't built for scrutiny. It was built for image, and image crumbles fast. Mark pretended nothing was happening. He strutted around like a man wearing a costume that didn't fit anymore. He told people it was a routine audit. He joked that someone probably complained about the coffee machine again, but he stopped looking me in the eyes when he passed my old desk. By the end of the week, rumors boiled, like water left on the stove too long. Some whispered that the company was hiding financial inconsistencies. Others said someone was funneling credit, distorting reporting, breaking protocols. Nobody said my name, but everyone knew. I didn't come back to the office. I didn't need to. Everything I had given them was already in motion. Then, in the middle of the chaos, something unexpected happened. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a competitor, a firm I'd quietly admired for years. Their recruiter didn't waste time. "We've been following your work for a long while," she said. "Your former manager took credit for a lot of things that weren't his." My breath froze for a split second. "How do you know that?" I asked. There was a smile in her voice. "People talk, talent shows. We'd like you to come in." Not a pity offer, not charity, an opportunity earned. A small, sharp satisfaction slid through me. Not joy, not triumph, but the feeling of a knot loosening in the chest. "I can meet tomorrow," I said. "Perfect. And just so you know," she added, lowering her voice, "we've already heard about the investigation. Whatever you gave them, it's shaking things." I hung up and sat still for a moment, the weight of her words settling like dust after an explosion. That night, I opened my email. There it was. Formal notice from the Labor Commission. They were launching a full investigation. Subpoenas were coming. Documents being seized. Interviews scheduled. Everything I had quietly collected for years was now a storm tearing through the place that had taken my loyalty for granted. And then came the shift, the moment everything turned. A colleague, one of the good ones, sent me a message. "Mark's panicking. He tried to blame the missing approvals on you. Investigators pulled the timestamps. They found out the truth. He's done." I stared at the message until the words settled into meaning. He's done. Not fired, not suspended. Done. The company was collapsing from the center, and Mark had been the rot all along. You'd think I'd feel triumphant, but I didn't. I felt something simpler. Relief. A deep exhale I didn't know I'd been holding for years. And then an unexpected twist. Another message from my colleague. They're calling emergency board meetings. Clients are asking questions. It's chaos here. Chaos. The very thing Mark thought I couldn't handle. But in the middle of that chaos, I found something I hadn't expected at all. Something that felt like the first bright crack in a long, dark wall. The next morning, the competitor called again. "We want you," the recruiter said, "not as an employee, as a department lead." A slow, quiet satisfaction spread through me, the kind that feels earned, not gifted. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. By the time the 4th week of the investigation rolled around, the company I once gave a decade of my life to was barely holding itself together. Managers avoided the hallways. HR spoke in hushed tones that carried anyway. People who once acted untouchable suddenly kept their heads down, hoping the storm would blow past them without demanding a price. It didn't, and while they scrambled to survive, I walked into my new office. Clean desk, real windows, an ID badge with my name spelled correctly, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet. Not the uneasy quiet of waiting for something bad to happen, the kind where your shoulders finally drop, like you've been carrying weight so long you forgot what it felt like to stand straight. The competitor didn't just hire me. They gave me a team, a space, authority, and a sentence I hadn't heard since my first year in the industry. "We trust your judgment." It was almost disorienting. My first week there, I looked at the workflow system their staff was using and saw immediately why projects bogged down. Not incompetence, just inefficiency. Old habits, bad structures, the same ones I'd been patching in my old job for years. Except here, when I pointed something out, they didn't shrug it off. They didn't say, "maybe next quarter." They didn't pretend not to hear. They fixed it. The change was small at first. A new approval path, a real project owner, a communication chain that didn't rely on luck. But within days, things moved faster. Cleaner. People walked around with energy instead of exhaustion. I didn't realize how used I'd been to fighting uphill every day until suddenly, I wasn't. A week later, something else happened. I hired my first person. She was a former colleague, someone who had quietly stood by me even during the worst months, the kind who worked hard, asked smart questions, and never treated me like a disposable tool. When I called her, she didn't hesitate. "I'm ready," she said. "When do I start?" Then came another, and another. People who knew the truth even when they couldn't say it out loud. People who'd watched Mark play his games and knew exactly who kept their department standing. By the end of the month, 4 of my old coworkers had joined my new team. I didn't poach them. I didn't whisper promises. They came because they saw what the company looked like without me holding up the beams. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt calm, like things were finally where they were supposed to be. Then, the final drop of the falling dominoes came on a Friday morning. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Not gossip, not rumor, a headline. Executive removed after internal investigation confirms misconduct. No name in the headline, but the article didn't spare details. Financial inconsistencies, abuse of authority, misrepresentation of employee work, violations of compliance standards, and at the bottom of the article, a single sentence. The former manager could not be reached for comment. I didn't smile. I didn't lean back and savor it. I didn't screenshot it to anyone. I just read it once, quietly, and closed my phone. Because it wasn't revenge. It was balance. Later that evening, as I was packing up my new office, one of my team members poked her head into the doorway. "Long week?" she asked. "Long year," I corrected. She laughed softly. "We're glad you're here. Things feel different now." I nodded. They did, for all of us. On my drive home, the city lights blurred past the windows. Not rushed, not frantic. Steady. Familiar. Like a rhythm I finally matched again. When I stepped inside my apartment, I didn't think about Mark, or the investigation, or the decade I'd spent trying to be loyal to a place that didn't know how to value loyalty. I thought about tomorrow, about the team I was building, the work we were finally doing right, the life that felt like it fit. Before bed, I checked my phone one last time. A voicemail, unknown number, probably another reporter looking for a quote. I deleted it without listening. Some stories don't need explanations. Some endings don't need applause. I turned off the lights, sat on the edge of my bed, and let the silence settle. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned.